Hello and welcome again. This is our second session that we're passing together, and I do need to mention something before we go ahead. There was many people that have communicated with me and told me that they're very happy at what we're doing. We didn't have anything negative. They, however, expressed the fact that they need to know where we're from. The people need to know where we're from in the same way of the existence of our people. Everybody knows we were here before, but people need to know what has happened to have some people live on reserves and other people living off reserve. What is the story with that? I do invite you, as you probably found out, the office is closed until the 15th of August, and we have to send some books out, which these are the general information book that contain everything I'm saying from the different dialogues are going to be happening, and the fact that the Confederation is recognized without a doubt, and that recognition doesn't come only from our people. That recognition comes from the fact, and I'm showing it to you, of a government of Canada saying that we have modified our charter, that we have modified our structure to now become a government. That's why we are called the Government of the Confederation of Aboriginal People of Canada. In other sessions, I was also asked to explain to you the logo, what the logo means, why it's there. But in my discussions, I'm going to be referring to pages. Every page has been identified to be able to give to you the page number to go to follow exactly what we're saying and where the information is coming from. I did do a presentation in French. The topics vary a bit because the difference between French and English vary as we sort of build a discussion together as to why I was chosen Grand Chief, as to why, as I know who I am, our rights, and our rights that are directly affiliated to us, ancestral rights and so on. I'm going to, contrary to the French, I'm going to specify something right from the beginning. I want to thank you guys, our people, the ones that know who they are and that have validated that information at passing on a test that gives you, without any confusion, how much Indian blood you have in you. Why are people coming forward now? Because people say, oh my God, since there was this and that done, now people are coming forward. Why are you coming forward? Because, as you know, in 2009, the Government of Canada requested the presence of the chiefs. There was the one from AFN, there was the one from CAP, and there was a whole bunch of them. And I didn't go there for the mere reason that it was to deliver an apology for the genocide that was given, communicated, passed on to our people, and the people that have had that have communicated that by giving birth to others that carry that same pain that will be carried on for a long time. But I did find that completely unacceptable for these people, for example, the chief of AFN, either Quebec or whatever, to identify himself as a chief. How can you be a chief and paid by the federal government at saying what they want? What do I mean by that? I think that should have a valid explanation. And I'm going to embark on that explanation as to why I think that and why it is the truth. For one, they've asked me to talk about Radio Canada. Radio Canada is a company that is supported by the Government of Canada. It's called a state corporation. And why would Radio Canada go online or even communicate it through the radio or television, the lies that were passed on? Excuse me. Because as we all know, Radio Canada is supposed to give you the truth. Upon my investigation following the allegations that have been brought, I did look at what were the motivations of the people? Why would some people try and convince us that they did a test on the dog? I mean, somebody has to be seriously demented to think that Viagard, which is a corporation, and as I know, the only corporation that is accredited by the government of the United States, Canada, and England, that would not know the difference between a dog and a human. Why was I so surprised? Because the mere fact is, our government of the Confederation of Aboriginal People of Canada is very stringent, very demanding at making sure that the professional side of verifying the DNA in an individual and the content associated to that through the gene of an Indian person without making any conflicts. I'm also going to cover as to why some of our brothers and sisters on reserve are so preoccupied by us. But before I cover all this, to honor what was sort of brought forward is the story that's linked to Radio Canada. To start with, they did not tell you, so for me not telling something to somebody is like lying. They did not tell you that the people that have pretended to do a DNA test on a dog, they didn't tell you that that's not our test. You can go to structures on the net and for $100, $130, you can order your own tests. You do your own thing. It says in there it's for your personal information, not to be used in any way, shape, or form legally. So you would go on the net and you would order that. They'd send you that through the mail. You get that a few days after. You're doing your DNA test. You send that in and then you get the results. But that's not what the government does. Our government, which is the only government right now, doesn't use that principle. We have signed a principle with the fact that in order to be able to have a person look at who they are, the first important part is to identify them. And how do we do that? We ask you to bring forward while you're doing the application. So let's take a step back here. The person that's going to be doing your test is a trained professional individual that will do your tests and has to validate who you are. What do we mean by that? In order for you to pass the test, the first thing is you fill our very stringent application. And on that application, they verify officially your address, and they use two important cards, such as government cards, health cards, passports, driver's license, to identify you and to make sure that you're the person that's there and the address that's validated with it. Following that, we take your prints. The prints are taken, and from those prints, we then do a DNA test. With a swab, the person has gloves, they have a mask, and they will swab you, and they will make sure that nothing touches that swab. It's sent in there after total verification and the approval with your signature that you want that done, because you want to know how much Indian, if you do have any. Some people don't, some people do. And you want to know exactly 100% who you are. So now let's reverse the question. They said that they ordered a test, but they didn't say from who. They said that they took a dog and they passed a DNA test to a dog. So I have to ask you, obviously that's impossible, because I don't know a dog that has a driver's license, a passport, or a health card. I do not know a dog that can sign an application. I do not know a dog that has fingerprints like humans. Immediately when I heard that story, I knew it was impossible. And to be honest with you, the first time I talked to Viagard, they laughed, because they told me, he says, Mr. Carl, Grand Chief, our structure is officially used to identify when they have dog competitions, which dog is who he is. Dog and people don't have the same DNA. But Radio Canada communicated that bad information. They lied because they know that's impossible. We cannot mistake a person for a dog. They don't even walk the same. So why would Radio Canada do that? I have a good answer for you. Why did they do the residential school? Why did they try and tell the off-reserve people they were not Indians? They weren't status Indians. Why is the Supreme Court of Canada said doesn't exist anymore? This is why I'm telling you that the general information kit in the following conversations, dialogue that we're going to have, I'm going to be doing reference to all these documents that's in there. And these documents are documents that come from the federal government. They come from the United Nations. They come from the provincial government. They're not documents that we fabricate. They're documents that exist that are sent to us. For somebody, let's look at something very strange. If I was to look at you and say you don't exist, you would probably sue me because that's illegal. What would be the motivations, for example, of a chief peacekeeper, Dwayne Zachary, to tell everybody on Radio Canada that we're fraud? Why would this person come and tell people we're imposters? Why has he not communicated with us? Why is it that I placed many calls to him, he never answered? We know the answer. What was the motivations of a person that says he's a Mohawk to come and tell you that and talk against us when that's against our principle? To come and say to people that are imposters. How come he doesn't know what we do? How come he doesn't know that the people that we have that are our members are real Indians? How come he does not know that you passed an official DNA test that cannot be fabricated, that is the truth, only the truth and nothing but the truth? Why has he not asked us why we do that? How can you talk about people that you don't even know? When I look at this, I was raised very traditionally. You know, many people say, well, we don't know if he's Mohawk or Algonquin. My father is Algonquin from Maniwaki and my mother's from Oka. It's as simple as that. Why would they not call us? Because they are afraid of us. And now I'm going to tell you the real story. Where the status and non-status Indians were born in the Métis. I'm going to be giving you some very important information that's also listed in there, which are Article 52, 35, and 25. Let's hold on to only two because the people said, we love the information you're giving us, but we need time to assimilate it. We need time to take the document that you've given us, to go through the pages, and to be able to relate to what we're saying. So I'm saying, in our book, very importantly, what is the most important article of our Canadian Constitution? And I say our because right now we're living with their Constitution and that will change. The article that we have to look at being the most important one is Article 52. And it says, the supreme law in Canada is the Canadian Constitution. We may have Indians from resorts say, well, we don't recognize that Constitution. They live by it. And you know what? The ones who say they're chiefs are paid, and because they're paid, they're not chiefs. You can't be paid by the enemy that stole everything we had, and I'm going to explain why, and say at the same time you represent the people. Let's look at things the real way, the objective way, but the real truthful way. So one might ask, how much do you get paid? If they get paid $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, how much do you get paid? I get paid zero. I do this voluntarily. And I do it voluntarily because I do not want my opinion, the way I see it, shadowed by the three enemies that was brought to my country, our country, the Indian country, by the Europeans. What are these three enemies? Simple. Money, booze, and drugs. Liquor and drugs. Why money? Because initially, before they got here, we had no money. Because money was irrelevant. Why was it irrelevant? Because at the end of the day, when you die, you only bring with you what you did good and bad. You don't bring the boat, you don't bring the car, you don't bring the clothes or the bank account. That gives us now an idea at the ones who are risen traditionally to say, I will bring with me what I did good and bad. That's why I cannot even start to comprehend or understand why the supposed chief, I don't think he's a peacekeeper, would come out and lie in front of cameras. Because let me tell you one thing. If you actually plant in your garden tomatoes, you're not going to get carrots, and vice versa. That is important because we've been lied at, used, abused, destroyed in every way we can look at, and all that was actually the apology of 2009. We're tired of that. Why are we existing? Now I'm going to tell you the real reason why. And I'm going to give you a brief description of what happened. And in there will be sometimes that you can relate to it. And if you don't, you can send us questions and we'll answer it. But very, very simply put, before the Europeans got here, we were here. So the Indians were already here on the territory, followed by the arrival of the French. That was followed after by the English. We all know, because the Royal Proclamation, which is in here, in our document, specifies about an agreement. So a war broke out on this territory between the English and the French. And they were settled initially by the Traité de Paris, which was the first, I guess, ceasefire, to use that in layman words, followed by a Royal Proclamation. A Royal Proclamation is not just your average little document that says, well, I don't like him or I like him. It's an agreement. And in that Royal Proclamation, even though the Indians were not brought in to have their ideas either believed or not, they were referred to. That's in there where they refer that our land was stolen. But it refers something even more important than that. It says that we are under the protection of Her Majesty. So I have a person that works very closely with me. He's one of my advisors, and he was the chief in command of the naval forces of Britain. And I asked him, my first question I asked him when I met him, I said, what are the subjects of the Majesty? Could you explain that to me? And he says, oh yes. He says, the subject of the Majesty is her richness, her children, her friends, her dogs, her cars. Everything she possesses is under her protection. So if we are under the protection of Her Majesty, that was signed in 1763. Therefore, it says in there that people stole our land and that they asked them to leave to their great displeasure and to make sure that they could have our confidence and work with us, because the relationship between the French and the Indians was stronger than the English and the Indians. But now, people ask me, they said, could you explain to us, please, what is a status and non-status Indian? Well, to start with, those don't exist anymore. The ones who are on reserve that think they're status Indians do have no idea what they're talking about. Because the highest tribunal of this country said it does not exist anymore. We're all Indians and we all have the same rights. Why are people trying to discriminate between the ones who are on and off reserve? Where does that mentality, idea, conception come from? Well, let me tell you. So in 1763, the Royal Proclamation was signed, and that was the end of the French. The French went back home, and then the relationship evolved with the actual Indians and the English. To be able to explain to you, let's choose a location which I'm very familiar with. I'm very familiar with Maniwaki because I was raised in the woods around there. So Maniwaki, for everybody that knows, is a place where many rivers meet. And the Indians used to use reserve when they went there after with the creation, because they could actually navigate to it. But before the Indians were ever introduced to the principle of reserves, did they exist? Absolutely not. Maniwaki was a trading post where it was operated by the Hudson Bay, and the relationship between the people at the trading post, the Hudson Bay, and the Indian was well known. Indians would bring their furs and so on, and that's where we would exchange. That's where the principle of exchange was taught from the native people to the white man. And the white man agreed with it because it was simple. Let's give this guy a mirror for a whole bunch of furs. Was it equal? Absolutely not. But you know what? It existed. So from 1763 to the big change of 1867, there was a relationship, but there was no reserve. Because the reserve was created around 1835. Why would we create a reserve if at the end of the day, the reserve mentality, which was created about 1835, that they started to think about, but the fundamentals of reserve came around 1875, after the Canada government was formed. Why do I say that? Because before, we have the proof that Canada was not a country. Canada was a province of England, and I have the proof for that. So therefore, from 1763 to 1867, many changes happened, many problems happened, and as we all know, they had to go see the king to fix it up. By the time they came back, it was a different problem, and it was kind of a very hazardous trip. Many people didn't make it and so on because it's so far. I mean, it's an ocean and so on. So they convinced the king to abandon the province principle and to create the country. Canada became a country in 1867 when they built a parliament. But in 1867, there was already people studying in 1835 the principle of reserves. So why would they want to have a reserve in Maniwaki? Because Maniwaki was a place where the native people went to do their trading. They were able to identify them. They were able to convince them not to stop the relationship basically that was already happening before 1875. What is important here is this. After 1867, they created the reserve. The reserve was able to publicize, to bring people at believing that the relationship, the way of life of our people on a reserve would be better than the one living off reserve in the woods, in the forest. As we all know, Maniwaki is normally Algonquin land. There was Mohawks living there, there was Atikameks and so on, but simple was that there was some Nipissings there too, but it was mostly Algonquin people there. So the government was able to convince a very big idea at bringing in to the people the fact that they would be able to be fed there, they would have health, they would have education, they would even be introduced to the Catholic, Anglican, Protestant way of life. I'm sorry for the tongue twister. And from there, very, very minor population left the real way of life, which was not a reserve because it was very foreign, was new, at moving there. And that's where the secret came. Since they had been thinking about creating that reserve, since they had been thinking of putting people there, they had to find a way to bring the population up to show that they had a relationship with the people. And when they passed on the reserve and said to whomever was there, "What's your name?" They took the name down. And they looked at the guy that was married with a woman, for example, and the guy that was married with a woman, that was an Indian married for a woman, for example, they all were Indians, even though the woman would have been a non-native person. And they called them status Indians. But the real question, who are the real Indians? Not because they're named by the government. Who are the real Indians? The one who continued living the traditions, the customs, the practices, the beliefs, the ancestral rights that were not on a reserve, or the other ones? We all know the answer to that one. But what would motivate people to say that you're not as native as they are? Is it important? Absolutely not. Is it in a way that you can feel as equal as others? Well, you know, when people tell you that you're less than others, They must have studied a lot, and we all know that that's not the truth. We all know that Zachary, that lied to us on Radio Canada, using Radio Canada, a Crown corporation, to communicate to you a lie in trying to convince us that we're not Native, that we don't have the right to recognize ourselves. Why would somebody even try and think of excluding others that come from the same DNA? The answer is very simple. Canada tried to have our land, our resources, and everything. And by paying the people that say that they're chiefs, were their government employees, they think that they will be endorsed at taking from us what belongs to us. But let me share one thing with you. If the people who say that we're fraud are man enough to call me, invite me so I can explain to them the error they are making, and that we're not going away, and that we are going to be successful, and that we are Indians. That's who we are. So now I'm telling you. I asked our elders to come up, to speak out, to be able to communicate, and we will do sessions with them, to be able to tell you, do not feel ashamed of who you are. Be proud, strong of who you are, and don't ever, ever let anybody tell you that you're less than others, because the one who tells you that needs help. We're not there to create conflicts with them. We're there because we are who we are, and we will not go away. The part of who you are belongs to you. It was given to you by your ancestors, and by you being able to come up with your DNA and not genealogy research that you say, well, that you are 10 generations or you're 16 generations. I agree that it could be put to a certain level of scrutiny and say, well, you know, but I would ask, how many Indians don't shave? Pure Indians didn't shave. And as I was informed officially, pure Indians would not live here because of the disease that was brought by the Europeans. So nobody is more or less than you are. It is important, very important, that you learn. Article 35 of the Canadian Constitution says Aboriginal people include Indian, Métis, and Inuits, and Article 35.1 say that their rights are recognized. Article 25 now of the Constitution, and remember Article 52, the law in Canada is the Constitution of Canada. It renders inoperative any law that comes in conflict with it. It says that you have ancestral rights. And if you have ancestral rights, it's very simple. You have to ask yourself, what are ancestral rights? Well, ancestral rights are rights that we had before, to a minimum, the arrival of the Europeans. Secondly, can non-native people have ancestral rights? They could, but they would have to be adopted, they would have to share them with the people, and they would have to be permitted by the selected or the selective persons to be able to be added equally to the native people, such as it was done before. Thirdly, and most importantly, the people that come up to you and tell you that you're a fraud when your ID card that you have is an official ID card that has 7 levels of security so it cannot be reproduced, and did the government of Canada tell me that they cannot afford a card like that, it's too expensive? We do. We do, because we want to make sure that at the end of the day, nobody can ever discriminate against you and who you are and who the followers from your ancestors are and will be. I took this time tonight to back up a bit in time to tell you who we are. It is not because we don't live on a reserve that we're not as equal, better or worse. We're not. These are our brothers and sisters. If they want to attach more importance to live on a reserve, let them be. Because as I said last time, and I'm going to leave you on this, the people that tell me or tell on the camera, well, you know, this person doesn't represent me. And I said to you last time, I said, if the person doesn't want to be represented for everybody's knowledge, we're not looking for people that want to be represented. We have a whole bunch of those. But if you want to be alone, if you want to think, as Article 2 says, that you're allowed in your own thinking, to think you live on a small little planet alone with 4 little pompons at the extremity, you're allowed to think that. But that doesn't mean the rest of the gang follows you. That does not mean that when people come on and say that we're fraud, and they know that their test is, you cannot argue them, they are who they are. What do these people think about you? Because we're not talking 3 people. What are these people that know that they passed the test? The test is valid, the company is accredited, and our test is not the same test that was alleged with the dog thing. They must think we're really stupid that we would swallow that story and go hide somewhere. But that's not the fact. That's not what's happening. And I want to tell you, there's always room for truth and only the truth. And I can tell you that Radio Canada was not honest with us. They slandered our name, like the Zachary guy in Ganawagi. He slandered our name, not knowing who we are. But we are stronger. We fly with the eagle. And we will get out of that because we will not be associated to that level of stupidity and ignorance. You know why? Because we are Indians, and because we will not let anybody tell us who we are, where we're going to live, and under which umbrella am I going to be going. Under the umbrella of the Sacred Confederation, which next time I'm going to explain the logo, or a foreign government to me. In closing, I want to ask our elders to take part of this. I want the women to group up because they are the leaders of our direction and governance. And I want to thank the Creator, Mother Earth, the 4 directions, and my 7th direction, which is mine, and all our ancestors around me, to be able to bring help to you and to guide you on the right path of honesty, and in no way let anybody discriminate against who you are. Jimagwich. Thank you very much, and have a good night.